Alright, how you doing? This is Chris V with MobDrama.com. We have Little Mike from Boston here once again, and we're just going to tell us a few stories. We're going to do a little series this time. We're going to try to do 5 different series, but this series we're going to focus on gambling. Back in the old days, that's how these guys made their money. Gambling, running horses, card games. So, how you doing, Mike? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the old days and the gambling?
Well, you know, to be specific, we made money with the policy numbers, you know, dog racing, horse racing, the baboot games, which was dice games, and card games, which we had an in-house game where we had set up like a little club. It was an old, it was a garage that was dug into the side of a hill that we rented out. In fact, it was my partner at the time, Rico Sacramone, who started that card game, and we used to cut 2.5% on the pot. So, you know, it was very profitable. And then from there, we would shy out money out of the club. Shy being loaning money to different customers and to different people, or anybody who we thought, you know, had the ability to pay it back. And the rates were like 5% a week.
It's like what you call loan sharking?
Loan sharking, exactly. But Chris, in those days, you know, 5% was the normal rate, but you know, if the guy was a favored customer, you charge him 3%, and if it was someone who was going to reloan the money, you might charge him 1% in a week. But it added up. It was pretty good. But primarily, let's get back to the gambling. In fact, specifically the horses. We used to take various, you know, horse bets throughout the city, and this is the northern part of Boston. So basically, you know, it wasn't a really profitable business, but we used to get involved in trying to fix the races. We had one jockey, and specifically Herbie Hinojosa, and in fact, he won 11 out of 12 races one day.
Nice.
He was a great jockey, but also when we'd go to the track ourselves, or I'd go to put some money down, his signal was he'd be walking the horse out with a double tap of his stick, of his switch. He'd tap his saddle twice, and that would tell me he's going with the horse. It wouldn't say he was going to win, but he was going to try to win the race. And in advance, in fact, the connection was with a guy by the name of Jimmy Nutilli, Jimmy the Snoot Nutilli. He was like a good friend at the time. Eventually turned out to be an enemy, but at that time he was a friend of mine. So we had Herbie who would guide us through the horses. That was for us betting ourselves. At the same time, we had an office, which is an office was the term used for where we would take the bets. It would be an apartment, various apartments throughout the city.
Okay.
Well, you take in the number bets and horse bets, and the big thing was the daily doubles at Wonderland Racetrack being a dog track. And we had agents throughout the city, especially at the General Electric plants. They had them in Everett and Lynn, all over the place.
Now, what year was this?
Well, this is in the 60s, in the early 70s. 70s particularly, I was big with agents. And I had our own office, but I had partners, of course, and we'd lay some of the big number play off to what we call town, which would be the main office in Boston. We were our own bosses, but you couldn't handle all the play. You know, if you get hit for a number, it was like, I think, $600, and if we laid that number off, we'd get paid like $800. So it was to our advantage sometimes to hit the number. But those are policy numbers that were taken out of the newspaper on the results at Suffolk Down racetrack, which was a horse racing track. But gambling, and then the baboot games, which was the dice game. It's the fastest money game in the world.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. And there was a game in town, but it was actually controlled by the Angiulo family. Okay. And we got Sonny Mercurio, my partner, the baker, Sonny the baker. He used to supposedly run the game, but he was a big gambler himself. In fact, I was myself. I used to go to the game quite often. They'd have 2 games a week, probably, I think it was a Tuesday and a Sunday night. And there was, you know, maybe 20, 30 steady customers and sometimes more. You know, you could fit into a cellar someplace.
It was like a private club, right?
It was a private club, but you couldn't have a club to be in one spot all the time, so there was various spots. So we'd meet at Knott Station, and someone would drive you to where the club was.
Gotcha.
And the same thing, if we were in Revere, you'd meet at a certain spot, and then they'd drive you to wherever the game was being held, which was in their various spots. You had to move it around because of the police.
Mm.
And yet, at the same time, you had a lot of police that were on the payroll. The Vice Squad in Everett, particularly in Chelsea, which was a known center of gambling.
Yeah.
The police were on the take on one hand, and then they're supposed to arrest you on the other hand.
But they always gave you a heads up, though, if they're
Well,
coming.
most of the time, you know, sometimes I can't ever remember one of our games being busted. I do remember when the feds were on us. They came down on our club in Everett. We had a card room in Everett, and they did bust that card room up. And in fact, my brother was a lawyer. He went down there and tried to smooth things over, and it didn't work. Because it was just when we were going to be indicted for the RICO, that was about 1977, 78. But you know, gambling was the lifeblood of our economy.
Mm-hmm.
It most certainly was, aside from massage parlors or other various businesses we had. But I used to try to get into fixing a few horse races in particular, and I can remember one incident. I can't remember those involved, but I know that we bet on this one particular horse $2,000 or $3,000 at the track, and then we try to move it around with.
And this is back in the 70s, right? So that was kind of,
yeah, 70s and 60s.
so that was big money back then for betting on a horse.
Well, then we put more with the bookmakers, other than our own agents. And what happened was, it was so ridiculous that the one particular horse that we wanted to win, we had to pay off the jockeys on the better horses to hold back the field. And what happened was our horse went wide, got caught in the sand, and couldn't move, and the lead horses were trying to hold back, and if you listen to the people in the tower in the booth, they were confused as to what was happening. Finally, the favorite broke to the front, and he had to win the race because the horse couldn't do nothing. He had gone so wide in soft sand. It was funny. And afterwards, when I listened to the replay on the radio, it was obvious that something had been...
Something was fishy about that race.
So it tells you that... But it was Rockingham Park in New Hampshire that happened. But all those horse races, unless they're really for big money, they try to fix them, especially the trotters and so forth. There's always somebody there trying to put an angle to make some money. It's obvious. Wherever there's money and there's a way to get it, they try to put an angle. Babu was a clean game because, you know, the dice was supplied by the house, so forth and so on, and you had 20, 30 different players throwing the dice back. First man, second man. It moved pretty quick. And there they cut 2.5%. So, you know, by cutting the 2.5%, it doesn't seem like much. It's only $25 on 1,000, but it adds up. You know, if you're betting 10,000 a roll, which in those days, which was you know, an average cut, maybe 5,000 would be the average roll. You know, it was a pretty good chunk of change going back to the house. In fact, most of the money ended up in the box, the same as it was with the card room. And you could borrow if you had good credit, if you were well known, which I was. And I got stuck a few times. I got stuck real good, but I was a big winner too. So, you know, it went both ways. And it was a very fair game. It was run very, very fair because of the people involved. You know, no one there could afford the game.
Yeah.
Plus, they used to empty the box every so often, so there wouldn't be too much at one place at one time. Because, you know, if someone did find out, you know, everybody there was either a quasi-criminal or a criminal, but, you know, they had connections and they might try to rip off the game. So that was the protection, was keeping the money out of the room as much as possible.
Out of all the gambling, which one brought in the most money? The cards, the horses, the dice?
The biggest winner of all, well, in my office, we did about 10,000 a week gross with numbers, which is a lot because people bet quarters, 50 cents, $1. You know, then we started, when they come out with the legitimate lottery, we started taking lottery. But the daily doubles from our agents just out of GE, just out of the General Electric plants in the area. I used to do about $2,000 to $3,000 just on the daily doubles, because I'd close the office at 8 o'clock after the doubles, the second race. And they'd bet a few dogs. And then people used to try to fix them too. And a couple of times I didn't pay people because I knew the races were fixed. And I had some problems over it. But the biggest winner overall was the card game. Because it was a constant. My partner, Richie Ferramo, he loved to play cards. He kept the game going. His brother was in the room with him, and he would moderate the games, and everybody get a sandwich. We had coffee. They had a little bar there. Try to keep alcohol out of it. But the game would roll for 2 or 3 days at a time. Then it closed for a couple of days and come back 2 or 3. So that's an awful lot of cutting.
Yeah, that's a lot of card playing.
So there was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a constant. But you had to have the players. So the better the game was run, and we had fixed the place up nice, under Rico, before he was murdered. The room itself was pretty comfortable. So, we had chairs and stuff. So after Rico was murdered by Sonny, that's what I heard. And from everything, I don't think he was ever charged with it, but he did him away, not for the reasons that were said, but probably for his lucrative card business and the shy business. So then we were 4 partners. There was myself, Sonny Mercurio, Sonny the Baker, Richie Ferramo, and Rico Sacramone. Well, after Rico was dead, it was just the 3 of us. Sonny kept us paying the family, even though, try to pretend that somebody else killed him. But Rico was a little off in the head, so, he used to take medication, and sometimes when he wouldn't take his medication, he'd get a little wacky. And he was a stone killer himself. In fact, Red Doherty was the cop when they found Rico's body. He didn't have the shoes on. He says, well, he got what he deserved. He done a few people himself. That's an exact quote from Red Doherty. He's dead now too. But he was a good local cop. He was a detective.
Yeah.
Pretty good guy. But well, I don't know. All in all, I'd say that the card games paid the most money. But there's a lot of stuff that went on the side. The skimming from the massage parlors was big.
Well, let's save the massage parlors for another episode. So let's end it right here. This is Chris V with MobDrama.com talking to Little Mike from Boston. And get ready for the 3rd episode coming up pretty soon. Thanks.
I hope it didn't offend anybody.
No way. All right, Mikey.